for the weekend. For lunch or dinner, come to Guthrie's, home of the original golden fried delicious chicken finger with their special world famous sauce. Open daily, locations in Trenton, Signal Mountain, and Ringgold. Go get Guthrie's, it's always good. And I'm Soar Gene 12, Chief Meteorologist at Report.
Nuga Radio 92.7.
Keon Rose, Nuga Radio 92.7 Action Sports Now. Day 2 of SEC Media Days featured 3 of the most highly anticipated coaching press conferences of the entire event. First-year Florida head coach Dan Mullen talked about restoring a culture of winning in year 1 that lasts far into the future. Chad Morris, Arkansas's head coach, also in his first season, stressed tempo and speed as a highlight of his young regime. And his players, like offensive lineman Yelda Foholt, have taken notice. And Georgia head coach Kirby Smart talked about bouncing back from last season's tough championship game loss. UTC Mock's mini plans are now available. Fans will be able to get 3 games for as low as $55. They can choose between the home opener and homecoming, and then 2 games from the Samford, Wofford, and Mercer games. Keon Rose, Nuga Radio 92.7 Action Sports Now.
Nuga Radio.
Are you brain dead? Still voting for pathetic liberals? Take 3 hours of Sean Hannity from 3 to 6.
Nuga Radio.
Then call us in the morning between 9 and 11.
92.7.
Nuga Radio.
What's going on? What's going on, good people? It's your girl Marie Mott on the Marie Mott Show. And as always, I'm taking this from the streets to city council, from city council to the mayor's office, from the valley to the mountaintop, and I'm just giving you a bird's eye view to what's going on in the city of Chattanooga. You got to wake up and get it with me. I hope you're having a good morning this morning. Today, we're going to be talking about gang life. Now, gang life is something that is romanticized in this society, especially with social media. And if I were to go back, because I am a child of the late 80s and the early 90s, one of the opinions that came forward from a Democrat, which was Hillary Clinton, was the perception that that inner city youth are super predators. And that ideology, I believe, with her opinion on that matter, grew legs and went from a baby to a grown man in the minds of a lot of people's perception about inner city youth. And so I wanted to have someone on the show to really humanize and get you, the listener, you, my friend, my neighbor, the person that I may worship with, the person that I may hold the door for at the gas station, you, the listener. I want to give you just some insight on how easy it is for youth to get into the gang life, why they get into the gang life, and just really pick the brain of a young man, a son of this city, Isaiah, who's here with me, who's really going to talk to us and give us an understanding and humanize how our inner city youth get into the gang life. Isaiah, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So give the listener just an introduction in who you are and how you got into the gang life.
It's really difficult. For everybody who has, took that route, is pretty much they probably had a different route or path to take to get to that lifestyle. In my instance, I got in the gang at the age of 14 years old. It wasn't because I didn't have family. I had a good family support. Just didn't have the understanding from my family at that time. I was going through things. My father was going through a divorce. So I was kind of left out hanging, and going through emotional things myself. And only people I could really turn to at that time for, to feel understood, to feel accepted was by, friends in the neighborhood. You get around these guys, it's hard. It's really kind of hard to explain. It's just, my instinct, what got me into the gang life was just the understanding and the acceptance that I got from friends of mine that I grew up with. I don't know, like I said, that may not be for everybody's instance, it may not be for everybody's case, but for my case, it was just wanting to be understood, wanting to be accepted by somebody, and that's how I got into the gang life.
So that's how you got into the gang life. You wanted basically validation, that someone saw you, that someone appreciated you, that someone knew you, that they could stop and talk to you, that they may ask you, hey, Isaiah, how you doing today? What's going on with you, right? So basically, because one of the things that Sergeant Josh May, who is a Chattanooga police officer here in the city, who is part of the VRI, the Mayor's Violence Reduction Initiative, one of the sentiments that he has is that he keeps hearing the sentiments from our inner city youth that they're not part of a gang, but they are part of a family. And for me, what that gives me, what that begs me to think about is that they're not seeing, that they're in a Crip or they're just a Blood or MS-13 or whatever gang that they're in, but rather they're seeing themselves being invited into a family. And one of the things that we have to understand, especially when we talk about the city of Chattanooga, that we have a lot of households that are single parented and that especially are parented by females alone. And so one of the things that we also have to consider is that when we talk about coming from a single parent at home, and then especially we had a study that came out just a few weeks ago that stated you needed to make about $15 an hour to be able to live within the state of Tennessee. What that says is that the average single parent person is probably working 2 jobs just to be able to make ends meet. Which, what does that mean for the inner city youth? That means that they have a lot of time on their hands, and that means that there's a probability that they're being left at home, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and if they're being left at home, 9 times out of 10, they're probably being left alone. So they're looking for those groups of people. Besides, it's just something natural about wanting to be accepted by a group of people anyway.
Right.
But these children are probably just looking for people within the neighborhood, and that's what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
These were just guys in the neighborhood.
See, I'm glad you just said that, because when I was going through the things I was going through at that time, I used to live with my grandmother, and a lot of times my grandmother had to work and she was never home a lot. So it was easy for me to get into things that I never was supposed to be getting myself into in the first place. But because nobody was there to influence me to do the positive thing, I got out and got with guys who were influenced on the negative thing.
Right. Okay. So 800-8949. If you have any questions, you want to comment, 800-8949. We're also streaming live on Facebook on the Nooga Radio 92.7 page. Feel free to drop a comment or a question, but give us a ring. But Isaiah, so I have another question. So how easy was it for these guys to talk to you about and to really kind of introduce and reel you in? Like, what were some of the things maybe that they did to kind of make it easy for you to get into the life?
Well, it's pretty much about reputation. When you looking up to people, guys who are being glorified in different neighborhoods as a big homie or OG, and you see the type of attention that they get, then you kind of somehow you start seeking that same attention. One of the guys that I used to look up to, which I still to this day don't understand how I could do that, but I didn't have any guidance. I thought everything that he did was cool, from drug dealing to shooting and getting shot at. And I thought all those type of things were just, attractive to me and very, very interesting for me to get into, because I seen how women looked at him. I seen how he would go around with money and have all this money and have the cars and wear his flag and gang bang and do these things. And I thought, man, hey, he's getting love. He's getting love from everybody, and I'm not getting that. You know what I mean? So that's what got me out there to doing the same thing. It's crazy how fast you can get swept up in something. Like I said, I got into a gang at the age of 14, and from 14 up until I was 18, which was 4 years, I was in shootings and things that I'm just 14, 15 years old, and I would go home, and when I get there, my father doesn't know, my grandmother doesn't know, nobody knows. I didn't say anything. Nobody knew what I was going through out there on the streets at a young age, because nobody was really paying attention. They would listen and say, okay, he's saying he's okay, so that's fine. But you can't do that. With these kids these days, you have to really keep your hand on them. You have to be hands on. And that's the problem with our communities. We're not hands-on with our kids anymore. I remember, I don't know how I remember this. My grandmother's probably listening. She probably remembers. I remember being younger, 2 years old, living with my grandmother. And I remember, having a routine every time I came home. When I come home, it'll be get in the tub. She put my bubbles in there for me, get my toys, things together. She had a dinner cooked and we'll sit down and watch Cops. And then when I go to bed, she would read me a story every night to go to sleep. She gave me a love and attention that I needed. But, and then, things happened and I was took away from that, not on, trying to hurt me, but I was, just my father decided to take me in. He was out for college at that time. So he came back and grabbed me to the college with him. But that hands-on that I got was what I needed for my whole life throughout.
All right. So we got a caller on the line. Good morning, caller. How you doing?
You are a breath of fresh air, man. Good show.
Thank you. Thank
I
you.
think a lot of people understand gangs and youth, and I'm 60 and was raised in Philadelphia, and was in a gang when I was younger. I mean, it wasn't a gang that was killing people, but let me tell you, it got rough. I mean, and the reason why this happens, I'm a white guy in a gang, and our gang was white, black, Jewish, Italian. We didn't look at those lines back then, but it was protecting our territories, because if we went into a different territory without our brother, we could get beaten up or stabbed. My buddies were stabbed at times, and it was protecting. And I don't know if you want to talk about it, our women, because, and I hate to use that term, but when you're a teenager, that's what you think, because the group from the other side comes over to try to take your women. And I don't mean to say that possessively, but, it's your girlfriend or whatever. And then we'd ride our bikes and then eventually our cars. But it's a sense of community. It's a sense of protection. You're not out there to hurt the public. You're not out there, but it's your family. And I don't think people quite understand that when you're out there by yourself and no family, you have everyone against you. So you want to join your family and you want to protect your family. I want you to elaborate that on as the difference between, say, 50 years ago and today. And I'll listen on the radio. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a good question. That's a very good question, sir. The difference is pretty much the difference is between then and now is there are no real leaders. I can't really say for your situation when you were younger in the gangs, but for my situation, you got to understand I'm a black African American, and back then we had leaders. You could think where the Crips and the Bloods came from. They weren't originated to kill each other. Black on black crime. No, they were there to protect the neighborhoods that they lived in from anybody. They all branched off from things like the Black Panther Party. And when you take those leaders who were pushing for the positive things, because they were, because rarely you will ever hear back then anything negative about these type of organizations. They were to better their people. They were to help their people. They were to help the communities. And when you take that leadership away, you have what's the word for it? You have a big loophole. You have a big
power vacuum.
A power vacuum, and you have young guys with no more guidance and no leaders, and then you got guys who say, "Well, hey, I'll take up. I'll be the man," but not knowing what to do because they had no guidance anymore. That's where the problem came into, when guys who were actually what we call them today big homies and OGs. These guys were really valuable instruments to the neighborhood, and they were actually doing things to better everyone around them, not to hurt anybody, not to drug dealing and all those type of things. None of those things was heard of back in those days. You had those things, but when it came to communities, they stuck together. You had leaders, and everything was hands on.
Now, one of the things that I also want to ask you, Isaiah, and again for the listener, 800-8949, 800-8949, is were there any community programs that deterred you? Was there anybody that showed up to your school? Did you have any faith-based initiatives that would come into and not just come to chastise you? Because I see this a lot. Mm-hmm. I see a lot of people who have opinions and chastisement for our inner city youth. But then we see things like here in the city of Chattanooga where Father to the Fatherless gets defunded. And they are instrumental in going into inner city schools, trying to do the best that they can. And now the city of Chattanooga, since January, has gone without a program really that reaches to the youth that keeps them from getting into these instances. Were there any programs or anybody that came to your neighborhood to reach out to you?
Besides football, that's no. To be honest with you, that's another thing that I also see. We have a lot of summer camps. We have these different programs like you have the East Lake Center, you have the Eastdale Center, things like that. You have these centers, but really every time I ride by, all I see the kids doing are playing outside, running around.
All right, you're on the line. Thank you for calling in. Talk to us. Give us some questions or some comments.
Good morning. How are you all this morning?
We're doing fine. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I've been listening the past couple of days, and I have been loving what I am hearing. I've been looking forward to listening every single day. I was just calling in because I feel like you all touched on a very important aspect as far as being hands-on, because something that you all said was, you know, everybody that has an influence on you has been hands-on with you. My grandmother was very influential in my life, but that was because she was always hands-on with us. And nowadays, we don't have a lot of people that are hands-on. Our parents are very distracted. As my father would say, the one-eyed demon or the one-eyed babysitter. You sit your child in front of a tablet and you expect them to only be influenced by good things. And that's just simply not how it works. So I felt like you all touched on a very important aspect as far as being hands-on.
Thank you, caller. We appreciate you.
Yes, we do. Yeah, like I said about the hands-on thing, man. Like it's we got all these different programs like centers and things, and the kids. Every time I go by, like I said, the kids aren't doing anything but playing. I remember reading about different programs that they had back in the day where they actually on summer camps they had hands-on training with these young Black kids. You know, they were doing things like art, martial artists. They had different programs set for everybody, whatever you wanted, whatever you wanted to do, whatever you wanted to be. Not what somebody else wanted you to be, but what you wanted to be. They had something for that. But now we have none of that at all in this community, and in any community in Chattanooga that I know of, there is nobody helping. There's nobody being hands-on with these kids, and we have to be hands-on with these kids in these communities.
So when I hear you say hands-on, so you believe hands-on is different things. So currently, right now, you're working, correct?
Yes.
What do you do for a living?
Right now I'm a welder. I do a lot of welding. I'm also a machine operator, skidster, forklift, things like that. But I enjoy the welding the most, and torching and metal fabricating is what I do. Never was taught that. Never even knew I would like to do it until I did it 6 months ago. I actually learned all that within 6 months and loved it. But I was never introduced to that. It's a lot of things that these kids love to do, but since, like I said, we're not hands-on, we don't know. This is the thing. A lot of people don't even know who their children are or what their children want to be in life because they never actually sat down with their children to have that talk. You have too many parents these days trying to steer their kids into being them instead of being better than them. And that's one of the biggest issues right now in my eyes.
Wow. And that's something that I see all the time. I hear people ask one blanket question, and that is, do you want to go to college? Well, what about the child who says maybe college is not for me because I don't want to be a doctor and a lawyer, which I'm not saying that it's anything wrong with being those, but we have a lot of children who are creators who, and that's what the mayor says, that this is a city of creators. Well, if we have a mayor who stated this year in his state of the city address that this is a city of creators, the question that I have is, are we creating avenues for children to be creators? Or are we just pushing all of our children through this one size fits all type scenario where the only thing we want them to do is just to quote unquote go to college? What about that? So one of the things that I am definitely a pusher of is skilled labor and skilled trade. When we look at our community 50 or 60 years ago, both of my grandfathers and even great grandfathers worked with their hands. So they were my great grandfather worked at U.S. Pipe for 53 years. Didn't retire broke, right? Had a pension when he retired, right? Had a job that he could stay at for the majority of his life. Those are the things that we are missing. And when it comes to skilled labor and skilled trade, we have a growing number of people because of the baby boomer generation that are retiring or dying, which is leaving a lot of room for this next generation of young people, if they so desire, to really catch them young and get them interested in doing things with their hands. But if we don't have people to ask those questions, you don't have the parents asking the questions, the schools are barely even functioning to even give them a halfway decent education, then a lot of the children, I believe our society is really pushing to get into gang life because they don't see a way of being anybody. No one's paying attention to them. They're getting ignored. They're just kind of shuffling through life. And then when it's time for them, you say, okay, now you're grown. It's time for you to go out there and make a means of a living for yourself. The education has failed you. You have no skilled trade. So how are you supposed to make money?
And that's the thing. My two biggest things, the reason why I feel like the inner city communities are not doing as good. But it's this right here, man. Unity and understanding. When we have these children, we have to really, 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 really pay attention. Like you said, you said that your grandfather, was, what do you do?
Ironworker.
How many of these older men that we know that know how to do these things? I know plenty of them. I know guys who own their own electrician companies and brick masonry. And my thing is, why aren't you guys teaching the youth this?
We'll be right back with you. Thank you for tuning in to the Marie Mott Show.
3, 2, 1.
Chattanooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4. 92.7 FM's news now.
A woman was stabbed in Chattanooga early yesterday, and now we're getting more details.